This is the Financially Simple Podcast, a show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. And now, here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
Welcome to Financially Simple. This is a finance show for small business owners about money, how it works in our business and our personal lives, and how we can build wealth to be financially independent. I'm your host, Justin Goodbread, and today is episode number 38. Today's episode is titled, What is a Value Gap? Now, we just concluded about what are we going to do when we sell our business and deal with the money, but I'm getting a lot of questions about, hey, Justin, you mentioned a value gap. What is that? And so I want to take a minute, come back into the sales process of a business. And this takes place, this particular episode probably should have taken place about episode number 12 or so. And I just skimmed over it because I honestly didn't think it was that big of a deal, but I want to take a step back and explain what a value gap is. And so today is dealing with the thinking about, I want to sell my business, but I'm not sure if I should. So one of the questions that I often get is, how much is my business worth and should I sell it? It's usually a combined question. And you're the business owner and you're looking to retire, and that's typically when this comes into play. I run a lot of business owners who get really tired in their mid-50s, late 50s, sometimes even in our 30s and 40s. We're just like, take this job and, whatever the old song used to say. But many times they'll come meet with a financial planner or they'll meet with their CPA. And whenever I'm meeting with a business owner, I often ask the question, what's the value of your business? And no one ever knows. I mean, just be candid about it. We never know the value of our business, and nor should we to some point. But what I'll do is I'll make a guesstimate on what the value is, and I have software that helps me generate that. And then I generate a written financial plan, and I discover many times that business owners haven't saved enough to reach their retirement goals. And the business owner make some decisions and make some adjustments. And they're looking and they're saying, man, I'm never going to retire, or I'm always going to be working in my business. I heard one person say to me a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to be working in my business until I die. I'm like, dude, I hope not. But that's what he said. So what do we do if we find out, hey, look, we haven't saved enough, or we're not going to get what we think we should from our business? Well, the most easy answer that most of us deal with right off the bat, and folks, I've been guilty of this many times. Many times the easy solution is, well, we're just going to go out and work harder. We're going to drive up sales. We're going to try to get more customers on the board. We're going to try to sell more of our product or our widget or whatever our particular sale we're trying to do. And many times the method is all we need, and it can help the business owner reach their goals. They may say oftentimes, look, I'm going to go out and drive sales, and I'm going to pocket, or I'm going to save my way to the difference between what I have and what I need. That becomes a little bit more difficult because we run into a situation almost like a vortex. Have you ever let the water out of your bathtub and you look down and they have the vortex of where the water's rushing through the drain tubes? And it's like, man, I'd hate to be an ant and be trying to swim my way out of that. There's no way. Well, what happens is the more money we make in income, the more money we have to pay in taxes. And so it becomes a circular calculation to where we almost, if we're not careful, cannot reach our savings goal. We can't save our way to our problems sometimes. So whenever I'm dealing with business owners and we look at, man, we're going to have a shortfall. If we try to sell the business when you're 50, or we try to sell the business when you're 60 or 70, we're going to have a value gap. And so that begs the question, what is a value gap? The easiest explanation I can give to you is this. The value gap is the difference in value between your current company's value in comparison to a leading peer. So let me say that a different way. The value gap is the difference between your current value of your business in comparison to a leading industry peer. So let's say I'm selling water bottles and my value is worth $10, and there's a leading peer in my industry who's also selling water bottles that is producing about the same amount of revenue, but because the business is structured differently, instead of a value worth $10, their value is worth $20. This is actually a very similar circumstance that I ran into recently. I ran into a company, and I'm just going to call it XYZ company, that was worth $1 million roughly. Yeah, we looked at the industry this particular company was benched against and their peers, and many of the leading peer groups in their industry with the same revenues were selling, instead of $1 million, they were selling for roughly $2 million. So in that scenario, the value gap was roughly $1 million. So there was $1 million value gap. And so there was room for this particular company to grow in value from $1 million to $2 million without having to go out and produce additional revenue. The idea is, with hard work and planning, you could increase the value of your company to be that of an industry leader. And now, like I just mentioned, you may have heard me say it subtly, I'm not focused on driving additional revenue. That's not what we're talking about here. Of course, revenue is going to help most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. Rather, I'm focused on making the business a best-in-class business, so that whenever the time comes to sell your business, the business itself is peered up at the strongest possible level to where you're getting the best value amongst your competition. So how do you measure where you are and where the competition is? Well, when you work with your CEPA, they're going to help you determine the areas of strengths and weaknesses in your company. They're going to use software that looks into your company very similar to that of an X-ray. So I've got to go to the dentist this week. And whenever I go into the dentist, or actually the assistant, is going to put me in that crazy X-ray machine that the thing spins around my head, and they're going to look at my teeth. And you would never know it, but the dentist with that particular software, that technology, I think it's called a cone beam, if I'm not mistaken, can see that I have fake teeth in my mouth. I was in a bad wrestling accident and knocked out half of my lower teeth. And because of that, I had to have some implants and some crowns and some root canals. And so many people would never notice that except for that crazy X-ray. So what an assessment does for me as the planner is it works very similar to that X-ray machine. I can go in and I can look at a business almost like a self-assessment, and you fill out along with the planner's help, you fill out information that lets us see the hidden things that no one else can see. And in doing so, I can get an estimate on what the value is. Now, on our website, Financially Simple, we're going to use this on our episode number 38. We'll put a link in the show notes to our complimentary assessment tool. And feel free to jump on there and use it. You can put your own personal data in there. It's confidential. Only my eyes and my team's eyes would see that. And if you want to know what your business is assessed at or what the areas of weakness or strengths are for your business, then it's a really cool tool.
You are listening to Financially Simple, destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner.
Now, when a client hires me to help them build their net worth, I use a 54-point measuring tool. And this measurement tool looks at 54 different areas where a business can have a lot of strength or a lot of weakness. So I'm looking at one here on my screen in front of me, and it's from a client that we just assessed a couple of weeks ago, and there's areas for improvement. So I'm looking, and the very first one is the age and motivation of the owner. Many times when the shareholders reach ages over the age of 70, it starts affecting the value. So we start seeing in certain industries that if it's a laborious style industry and a lot of labor involved, we start seeing that whenever someone reaches in their late 50s, early 60s, obviously their strength is not there as it was for a 30-year-old. And so we start seeing some issues to where the price ends up dropping in value because the company itself starts to become very weak. Another example is are we dealing with partners or families? Are we going to have conflict during the sales process? Another issue is the attitude of the owner itself. Is the owner in a hurry to sell? Do they have to sell it? Is there a health issue? I've got a client, unfortunately, right now that we have to sell a business. We have to. We can't wait on market timing. We don't have time to build the business up in excessive value. We have to sell it now. And so because of that, he's more than likely not going to receive the market value. And he just had a health situation occur. And unfortunately for him, he didn't start planning soon enough. And so that's going to cause a lower value. And we look at things like the management team and the sales team. We look at the products. We see what types of products they have. We go in and look at the vendor concentration. How many vendors are they using? Are they using just one? Are they have price points on their vendor? Well, how does their sales and marketing literature look? What do their employees look like? Are they part of a union? Are they not? Are their computer systems old, young? Where's the location of the business? Is it multinational? Is it in a small town somewhere in the United States? What about the opportunity for growth? Are there barriers for entry? Things like, are they currently in lawsuits? Have they dealt with lawsuits? Are there environmental issues? Do they have a business plan? And long story short is there's a ton of different ways that we can go in and look at a business very similar to an X-ray and measure where the business currently is. But why does it matter? Why does it matter if we can take an assessment? After all, at the end of the day, we just want to drive sales, right? That's what I often hear. Well, not necessarily. The reason why an assessment matters, and it matters in trying to bridge this value gap, is because if we can change the multiple of our businesses with improvements within the company, then the purchase price could become higher or the sale could be easier. We spent a fair amount of time in the early episodes talking about the areas which drive value. We talked about capital, the 4 C's. We talked about intangible and tangible assets. We talked about scalability in our team. However, we didn't talk specifically about how we would achieve driving value. After the thorough assessment is performed, we would then need to identify the areas of weakness. And ensuring up and bringing up those areas of weakness, the business profitability should increase. Margins should strengthen. Systems should solidify. And the result could be a drastic increase in the value of the company. Now, here's the kicker. Without killing ourselves to make additional revenue. I'm currently looking at my planning software on the screen in front of me as I record this podcast. I placed a scenario for a real client of ours into the system. And we've already performed a detailed assessment. And we know the areas of weakness. We know the areas which we need to drastically improve. And in our planning, we know roughly the company is worth about $1.5 million. However, there are best-in-class businesses within the same exact industry carrying the same amount of revenue, which instead of selling for $1.5 million, they instead are selling at an average of $3.8 million. So to the tune of more than double what our current client is. We have this information via the sales of similar businesses from software companies and from third-party providers. So our goal is to increase the company's value to be a best-in-class business. Now look, I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to take a ton of work. But should we succeed, then the company has the potential to double its value. However, when a business begins to work on value, inevitably, the company becomes more efficient. So let me say it again. As we're going toward the approach of growing value, inevitably the company becomes more efficient. And oftentimes the revenues of the companies increase. So here is what we're looking at with this particular company. If the company were to grow at a 10% growth rate, well, which coincidentally is slower than it has been growing, and the multiple were to increase about 50%, from a multiple of 2 times EBITDA to a multiple of roughly 3.3 times EBITDA. After the 6 years, and the 6 years came from, this is when the client wants to sell the business, is roughly about 6 years. If we work efficiently within the business and we grow the company by 10% and we increase the multiple from 2 to 3.3, 50% increase in multiple, after 6 years, this business, which is currently worth about $1 million, could easily reach $6.2 million in value. So this $1.5 million company could quadruple in value just by affecting the multiple and the growth of the company. Now, again, don't mistake what I'm saying. This is not a magic pill. If this company and this business owner decides that, yeah, I want to double down and right before I sell, I want to give it everything I have, and yeah, I realize it's going to be a ton of work, this could be amazing for this particular owner because compound interest works on better on higher numbers, because they have a vision and a work ethic to get their retirement goal, or in this case, he wants to sell the business to move on to something new. So my point in the value gap is this. First of all, you have to know your value. and you have to know the value of those best-in-class businesses, which are your competitors. And if you know the two, then my question is to myself many times and to my clients is, why aren't we a best-in-class company? Many times the clients have an idea on what they need to do. Oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes the solution is, let's go out and drive more revenue. And that's not what I'm after here, folks. Yes, we do want to drive more revenue many times. That's not what I'm after in the value gap. The value gap is how do we increase the value of your business so that a potential buyer will look at your company as a best in class and give you a larger paycheck. So as you approach business, sure, we must worry about top line revenue, but the value of the business should also weigh heavily on our minds. Guys, that's it for this episode number 38. As I always say, life is hard, life is complicated. Money certainly doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all go out and make it an outstanding day today.
You have been listening to the Financially Simple podcast. The information in this show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor.